Hi everybody, it's Julie, and today I'm going to be making a simple Mother's Day card that I designed, and I'm going to be doing some watercoloring, and I'm also going to be using my Cricut Maker. And to start with, I am going to launch Design Space, and the fastest way to get to the upload button is to hit Canvas and then drop down there on the menu to the left and click Upload. I'm going to click on the green upload button and browse my files. I happen to know where this file is stored on my computer, but you can also drag it and drop it into that box there and then click continue. I'm not going to mess with adding it to a collection that you see there on the left hand screen. I'll do that later. Click on upload, and it's going to look different when it lands on the canvas, but trust me, it's going to do what it's supposed to do because I've tested it like 5 billion times. Okay, so I wanted to show you that Design Space is going to bring this in as a group of layers, and so I'm going to hide the sentiment for a second here, and I'm going to grab or click on the basic cut there, that panel that has the flowers, and I'm going to change the color of it. And the color picker thing is over there on the left, as you can see, and I like to match the colors that I'm working with to the colors in real life that I'm using with my paper, because then it keeps me organized when I'm cutting my project and I don't load the wrong paper at the wrong time. So now I wanted to zoom in really quick before I turn the sentiment visible again. I'm just going to zoom in close here so you can see these cut lines. These are open paths and closed paths. The little circles in the centers of the flowers are going to make a complete cut and drop those little centers out of the paper. But the leaves and the petals have partial cuts. They're open paths. And so the petals and shapes are going to remain attached to that panel so I can pop them up. So they're going to be connected. So now I wanted to make the sentiment visible again. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that group and click ungroup so I can work with these things individually. It's easier for me. So now I'm going to grab the sentiment, and I actually want to duplicate it. So I'm going to hit that duplicate button. And so there's the copy that it made, and I'm just going to scooch that over here a little bit closer. I actually want two of these. I want to cut this sentiment twice out of this color of cardstock, so I'm not going to change the color there. But I'm going to go up to the duplicate button and duplicate that a second time. And then I'm going to go back to the one that's sitting on top of the cut flowers. And what I want to do is select that and change the operation. So I'm going back over here to the operation drop-down menu, and I'm going to click on deboss. Now, the reason I'm going to select deboss is that skinny sentiments like these die-cut shapes, it can be hard to line them up where you want them and keep them all nice and straight on your card. So I am going to deboss the sentiment onto that same panel, and I'm going to attach the debossing and the panel with the flowers. They're attached so that that debossing will occur exactly in that location when it goes to the machine. I'm not using group because group only works on the canvas. It doesn't work when you do your actual cutting. You have to use attach. So now you can see where I put the panel there behind. When I layer these two die cuts on top of each other, I have those debossing lines as a guide. And trust me, I was trying this to eyeball it myself without doing that, and I had a heck of a time. So this is just a fun little trick I figured out as I was working on this design. So now that I've done all this prep work, I'm going to save it at this stage of the game. This is when I want to save it because I've made all the changes I need to. So when I save this to the card making folder in my collections, I'm going to give it a name. I can go straight to the Make It screen. I don't have to go through all this file prep here on the canvas. Now I'm on the matte prep screen, and you can see there it's telling me that it added my project as I set it up into my favorites or my collections, my card making collection. So now I need to set up my mats, and my mats in real life are going to be set up the same as they are on screen here. So I'm going to grab these elements and I'm going to move them to the bottom of, because Design Space automatically throws them at the top left corner every time. I'm going to move them to the bottom of my cutting mat. So I'm going to highlight the next cutting mat where my gold sentiments are going to be cut out. And I'm going to also move those down to the bottom of my cutting mat. And there's a reason for this, which I'll show you when we get to the actual cutting. But whenever I do intricate cuts, and I consider anything that's not a square or a circle an intricate cut, this is going to make my life easier. So now I've got those positioned where I want on the cutting mat. I'm going to go back up to the first one because I like to do things in order. That's kind of an OCD thing of mine. And I'm going to click on continue. And now I need to select my materials. Now I'm working on 140-pound watercolor paper, my favorite watercolor paper. And I'm going to select poster board. Now you can create a custom setting. And to do that, you go to Browse All Materials, and you're going to drop down there in the window and click Material Settings. And then you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom of this. They really should move that button back up to the top. It would be so much easier. And then I'm going to type in the name for my custom material and save it. And I have one that I created. I type the name in and I hit save, and it's called Watercolor Paper Deboss and Intricate Cut. However, how did I get to that pressure setting? Well, I actually scrolled up to poster board because I already knew that poster board would work for this watercolor paper, and I've just done that by testing different cut settings and figured out that works great. And I'm going to look at what poster board says for the pressure settings and the number of cutting passes. And I'm going to use that information on my own custom setting back down here. I have to go back down to it, find it, and hit edit. And then I can play around with that slider and change the amount of pressure, and I can change the number of cutting passes, and I can change the type of blade that I'm working with. So all of these things can be altered. Now, this setting that I made, I didn't have time to really test it. The first run I did with it, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. So I need to tweak it some more and continue more testing to nail it. So for right now, I'm just going to click out of this, and I'm going to go back to the poster board setting because I know that it'll do what I want it to do. And then I can go ahead and prep my physical cutting mat for the machine. So I'm going to load that watercolor paper. I'm just going to line it up. I just realized that my cutting mat is stickier on the other end. The bottom end has been used quite a bit, so it's starting to lose its stickum and tack. And this is a heavier paper, and usually with heavier materials, you're going to need more tack on your cutting mat. So I'm just going to, I like to use the standard grip mat. This is the green one. And I have neutralized it when it's brand new. That's too sticky. So I neutralize it by patting my hands all over the surface until I've got it as sticky as I need it, but not too sticky that my paper tears. And then I'm using a brayer to go over the top to make sure that this watercolor paper is adhered down completely all over the surfaces and I don't have any air gaps. Now I'm at my machine, and I did want to mention that I store my Cricut Maker on a rolling cart. This is the Hudson cart with the optional cart topper from Michaels. And I bought this gizmo because I don't have enough, I don't have a table support underneath the cutting mat. And so my cutting mat will droop, and this can affect how well things cut. So I needed some support, so I found this on Amazon, and they make them for the explorers and they make them for the makers, and I can just assemble it together and plop it on there, and it will keep my cutting mats nice and level. And you can break it apart and store it inside the storage compartment there on your platform. So now I'm going to go ahead and load my cardstock. And I'm going to change my blade because over on the computer, Design Space is telling me that the first thing I need to do is load my debossing tip. This is what the debossing tip looks like. And yes, it's optional. And yes, it only works on a Maker. But if you can get your hands on one, oh my gosh, this makes a huge difference because a lot of times I can't see the score lines on my textured papers. And this thing debosses them into the paper so much better than the scoring tool or the scoring wheel. So I switch everything to deboss now when I need to score. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the Cricut button, and it's going to double check to make sure that I have the right tip loaded for this operation, and then it's going to start the process. And it will just go along its merry way doing the debossing, and then it will stop. And this is when I need to change to the premium cut. I like to use the premium cut blade because, or what do they call it? It's premium. The reason why is it's carbide, German carbide steel, and it lasts a lot longer than the regular cutting blades. So I like using the premium one. But you want to make sure your blade is clean and it's not broken. It's sharp. If it's dirty, you can take some, one of those alcohol prep pads. I keep a bunch of those in my craft room for all kinds of things, and just clean the tip of that blade. Make sure it doesn't have any sticky adhesive on it. Then hit the Cricut button and it's going to go ahead and do its cutting. And then once it's done doing that, I'm going to meet you back in Design Space to talk about the sentiment. So we used poster board for the watercolor paper, but this sentiment is being cut on a different material. I'm just using regular cardstock. My favorite cardstock is that Park Lane or American Crafts cardstock. So I switched it to cardstock for intricate cuts. I'm going to leave it on regular pressure, but once it does the cutting, you don't want to hit the unload button. So it went ahead and did its cutting and did 2 passes, because that's what it does for intricate cuts. And on this paper, you want to double check, make sure you got to cut all the way through. If it didn't cut all the way through, don't hit that unload button. You're just going to go back up, press your paper all back down into place, and go up and hit the C button again, and it will cut exactly in the same spot. But if you unload the paper first, it won't be able to line up dead on the second time around. So make sure you don't unload. Double check, make sure you got a clean cut. If it's all good, then go ahead and hit the unload button. So that's just a handy tip for doing those intricate cuts. And then when you get over to your work table, you want to flip your cutting mat over. And I did this with the watercolor paper too. You always want to roll your mat away from the paper, because if you try to pull the paper up, chances are you're going to tear it. And you're definitely going to crease it, wrinkle it, warp it, whatever. It will become very misshapen. And so to avoid that, you want to roll the cutting mat away. Now that area there of my cutting mat is pretty sticky. So I'm having to move slowly. And if you move too fast, you will warp things, especially if they're delicate. And so be patient and just ease that paper away by holding it down flat to your work surface and rolling the mat away. And so you're just going to see me use my fingers to kind of get a hold of the little bits and pieces there, the negative, and just prevent that from remaining stuck. So I can just go ahead and separate the two. Now it's going to become easy because I'm not working with it's the rest of the paper surface there. Okay, so there you can see where I got a little bit too rough and that kind of flopped up. Now it'll work out, but you want to avoid that as much as possible. These are some tools I like to use for removing my intricate cuts. I have a pin pen, and sometimes if you need to go and get those negative spaces out, you can get a hold of them with this. You can use a needle if you have a needle, but it's so much easier. I have arthritis in my hands. I like to use a pin pen because it gives me something that's much easier to grip. You can use tweezers. I have a little bowl here where I like to collect all the die cut pieces I'm saving, and then I toss the scraps into the waste bin. And if I'm having a really hard time getting underneath it, I can roll the mat or curve the mat. A lot of times I'll do this right along the edge of my workbench, but that would be off camera. You wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing. But you can use the edge of your workbench as the corner of it to go ahead and curve or roll your cutting mat, so this will start to lift up and you can get under it with a spatula. You can use tweezers. I love using tweezers. It's like having a third hand, I swear. It gets in there where my fingers just can't. And you'll notice I do not have a beautiful manicure. I don't have lovely nails. They're always cut really short. Crafter hands. So you're going to get under there and use those tweezers for all that delicate stuff. And like I said, you want to work it carefully to lift it up so you don't warp it and tear it. So there it is. Perfect. So I did that. And then I'm just going to show you the debossing here on the watercolor paper. So now I can see exactly where to mount that sentiment. It will line up all straight. Now I put those pieces face down onto a Cricut Joy mat because this is just kind of my little sticky working mat. And I can use it to hold those die cuts in place so I can apply some a fine bead of adhesive, and I don't have to get my fingers on it. And then I'll use my tweezers to lift it up. Anytime I'm getting my fingers messy. I don't like it. Anybody that knows me knows that a lot of times I'll wear gloves when I'm working with messy stuff. I don't like it. So I like to find ways to deal with things without getting my hands all messy. It's one of those, I don't know, it's an OCD thing, I think. So now I'm just going to press that into place. I use those debossing lines, and I'm using a bone folder to just burnish them down and squidge any excess glue out to the edges. And then I'm just going to use the tips of my tweezers there. These are angled tweezers. I love them. I can't get by without them. And I use that kind of as a squeegee to squeegee away any excess glue that kind of ooges out from the edges of those die cuts. And I'm just going to continue till I have everything in place on that first layer. And then I can go ahead and repeat that with the second layer. So I have a thicker die cut sentiment, almost like chipboard. So you could do this 3 or 4 times to make it really thick. But I think 2 is going to work on this card. But if you're, feeling it, you can do 3 layers. Now, to do watercoloring, if you want to watercolor your petals and you worked on watercolor paper, you'll want to do your watercoloring probably before you glue on the sentiment. So I'm just using the Cricut Clean Color, or the Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I love that these are so pigmented. I'm using some pale colors first, and I'm just swiping some color really quick. And the darker the color you use, the more light-handed you want to be, because heavy colors are going to be very, very saturated. So just use a tiny bit. A little goes a long way. You can always add more. So I just made some swipes. I did not color everything in. I just made some swipes, okay, really quick. Then I'm going to take my water brush, and I love this water brush because you can fill the reservoir and then squeeze the water out, as you need it. And I have some paper towel there so I can blot away if I have too much water. I can lift that up and blot it off. When I change colors, I can clean the tip of the brush. And then you can go ahead and pop those die cut pieces out and put adhesive all over the back and mount it to a pre-made square card. This is a 5-inch square card, and this panel is 4 3/4, I believe, in size. So it'll fit perfectly onto a square card. And included in the file is a cutting template for a 5-inch square envelope to match. Woohoo! So I'll have all the supplies and everything linked down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it helpful.